I follow some people, not that much, but they pop up on social media, and they'll have tips. So like, if you're struggling with your story, do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, why? Like, I could easily say, if you're struggling with your story, hit yourself over the head with a frying pan. It might help, but it's probably not the best thing to do. But maybe it'll help, you know. And so a lot of these tips that they give out, I'm like, I don't. That's not how I would fix a story. I wouldn't even begin to use that to fix a story. And so that's what pisses me off when I see advice like that on the internet.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Jamin, and I'm here with Phil Hudson, and we're doing, this is Screenwriters Need to Hear This, the podcast, and today's a special episode. It's frequently asked questions, or at least infrequently. There's some versions of questions that people have been asking, and so we're going to answer them. I don't know how often they ask them.
We have answered a lot of questions, and so this is like our fourth, I think, frequently asked question. Typically, we post a tile on your social media where people can ask their questions. This time, we did something a little bit different. We went to the internet, and we literally found what are the top questions that we haven't answered on the internet as well. So I think this should be very helpful for people.
These are coming right from the internet.
Let me explain why I got this idea. So for those of you who don't know, when you email the support at Michael Jamin, I'm the guy who answers those. And a lot of these are questions that I'm getting from people. And I was like, okay, there's some basic stuff that we're not covering. And how can we better address those? And you had the great idea of combining them into a single podcast. So
great idea. All right, so Phil, hit me with those questions. Let's see if I have any answers.
Number one, how much do screenwriters make?
Well, it depends, obviously. It depends, it depends if you're a film writer or a TV writer. But TV writers, when you're probably asking how much, can you make when you break in? And so the WGA sets minimums, which is good. Like the minimum, it means this is the minimum amount that you get paid if you do a project for a WGA signatory. And that means any production company or studio that is signed with the guild. And so that's pretty much every reputable production company.
Signed meaning that they've agreed to these terms in order to staff the competent writers at the guild. So It's an exchange to say, you will meet these standards, and thus you get access to the best writers because they're all in our guild.
Yeah. And so animation may or may not fall in the Writers Guild. Sometimes it's covered by the Animators Guild, so they have a slightly different minimum. But certainly all the big players and live action, is with the guild. And so I'm not talking about the guy you meet in Starbucks who says, "Hey, I want to hire you for a project." That doesn't, we don't know about him. So the minimums are actually quite high, and it just depends whether you are writing a half hour, an hour long, whether it's cable or network or streaming, and the minimums vary from outlet to outlet. So I can't answer that question with any authority. So like for a sitcom, I don't even know quite what it's at. I think for a network sitcom, the minimum is something like probably $5,000 or $6,000 a week for the low level staff writer. So that's a lot of money actually for the lowest.
I think it's $5,000.
It's $5,000 somewhere in the fives, and so for a week's worth of work, that's a good salary. But you're not working. How many weeks are you working? It depends. You may be on a show that goes 24 episodes on the network, and that's really good. Now you're working maybe 9 or so months, or maybe close to 10 months out of the year. If you're working on a streamer or on a cable, you might only be doing 13 episodes. If you're working on a streamer, maybe you're only working during pre-production as a writer. So it just greatly varies. But you can find out what these minimums are by going to the WGA website, and they'll give you. There's something called the schedule of minimums, and you can look up. Well, how much would I make if I was working on a drama or a sitcom or cable, whatever. Just go check it out. So, but then features is a whole different bag of worms. So
yeah.
All right, next question, Phil.
Right. What is a montage in screenwriting?
I mean, a montage is basically it's like short little clips of the training sequence of Rocky, right? When he was training for the big fight, then he's chasing a rooster, he's running up the stairs, there's shots of him running down the street, there's shots of him punching meat, right? And so they're just kind of quick cuts. Often it's set to music, often it's without dialogue, and they're hard to produce because a montage is going to have is, quick shots, 3 seconds here, 3 seconds there, and then you're constantly moving the cameras. So even if you're writing an episode of TV, be wary of the montage, because it may only occupy 60 seconds of time or whatever. But to shoot all of that, you've got to move the cameras everywhere, and it's going to take a long time to shoot that. So you want to be judicious when you're putting montages in. They're often fun to watch, and they're silly. They can be silly or fun or exciting, but you have to use them judiciously because they can be a real pain to shoot.
How many montages maximum should I have in a screenplay? And this
think
by the way, this is a Phil question because I wrote something for you, and it's in the course if anyone wants to see. It was a Spectacom FD, and I think I put in 2 montages, and you called me out on it.
Yeah, I think one's enough. I think one is enough. Unless you're using it almost like ironically or in a funny way, like you do one training montage and you cut to the present guy, and the character goes, "That's not what you do. You got to do it like you forgot to put your hat on," and then you do another montage with the hat on, and so maybe that's funny or whatever. But it's really just I would recommend one. That's enough.
One, right?
If at all, one or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And you brought up budget, and so this is a question from Dave Crossman, who's in your screenwriting course. He posted this, and I thought it would be a good question for you to answer. How concerned should I be with budget when I'm writing a spec pilot? Should I just show my capabilities and go wherever I want, or should I try to make it something producible, knowing it's probably not going to be sold?
Even though it's probably not going to be sold, I don't have a good answer for this. But like, if you write something and it's clearly going to cost $1 billion to produce, I don't think it's going to be a great sample. If you can write something that's inexpensive and still make it good, a good read, that to me says a lot. That says, oh, look at this, look what this person can do without theoretically spending a lot of money. And so even today in the course, we did a live in my screenwriting course where I talked about the movie Pig. Now, which was a beautiful movie. I thought, starring Nicolas Cage. I thought it was really well done. It was beautifully written and directed. But that movie did not break the bank. You could have probably shot that on your phone, and you would, this is what you're doing, you want to write your script. It's it would have been inexpensive to shoot that. So it's really more about, obviously it's more about the writing. It's the script. If you can show that you can do less with more, I think that's more impressive than saying, hey, than needing a cast of thousands and all that stuff.
Yeah, that reminds me, you've kind of famously talked about the budget for Marin and how you basically didn't have much, and yet that was one of the more critically acclaimed shows you've worked on.
Yeah, right? For sure. Yeah. So
cool.
Try to write for less with less money. That's what I would say.
Great. All right. Do screenwriters get royalties?
Yeah, I mean, sure, you're supposed to. Royalties are what you. Some people think it's like, oh, you're so lucky to get paid twice. It's like, no, this is how it works. This is how like authors get paid royalties. You're forfeiting. You're getting a royalty in exchange for giving the studio the authorship rights, so that they want to pay you for it. They want those rights. They just don't want to pay you a lot. So that's what royalties are. And basically when the studio sells something, so they pay you once for their project. And then you write it, right? But let's say it becomes a hit, and they start airing somewhere else. It airs overseas, or it airs in a rerun, or they sell it to Netflix or whatever. They're making extra money on it, so why shouldn't you make extra money on it, right? And that's what royalties are, or we call them residuals. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think royalties and residuals by definition are different things, but I think it's based off of, like you said, the ownership of the author. You can have, I think an artist makes, like the author of a book maintains copyright and authorship, and then they license that to a publisher, and then they get paid royalties, whereas you're literally selling and trading authorship, so you get a residual, which is effectively the same thing, just legally a different definition.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, I think that's right.
I'm sure someone will correct us on that, I'm sure.
Right. I'm not a lawyer.
All right.
I don't give legal advice.
Yeah, don't listen to us for legal advice.
Yeah.
Legal device either. How this is an interesting question. I'd love to hear your answer on this. It's a little bit ethereal, I think. Okay. How to be a successful screenwriter?
Define success. right?
I think that's the exactly what my thought was. What does success mean? And I think the person asking this question is probably a younger writer, and they're probably thinking to themselves, success is lots and lots of money,
Right.
right? Or accolades. That's not necessarily the way I define success in my late 30s now, right? Or
Right.
it's just a different thing.
I'm lucky enough that I made my living my entire career being a TV writer. I haven't had do any other odd jobs, raking leaves or anything. So to me, that says success. Now, I certainly haven't had as much success, nor anywhere near as much success as Shonda Rhimes or Aaron Sorkin or Steve Levitan or Greg Daniels. I haven't come anywhere close to that amount of success. But I get and maybe if I had worked a little harder or networked a little more or just been a little more ambitious, maybe I would have gotten close to that level, or maybe not. But to me, I was able to come home at the end of the day and give my kids a bath every night, and I watched them grow up, and so I wouldn't trade any of that. I had just, in my opinion, I had just the right amount of success so that I could be home and not have to travel the world and not have to have too many plates spitting. I'm happy with where to me, that's plenty of success. So, but if this person's saying, how did they become a successful screenwriter? Like, we got to start with learning do you know how to write?
That's the next question, which is how to be a better screenwriter.
Right. Yeah. Well, many of so this is Phil's idea again. So I started a screenwriting many years ago. Phil, you convinced me to start a course, and I didn't have the time or even inclination to start a screenwriting course. And then the pandemic hit, and then I had plenty of time because Hollywood.
You were actually quite against it, and I should point out because I don't think you'd ever bring this up, but there's kind of this notion that if you teach, you're kind of on your way out, or you're not doing, and which is not true for you. You're actively working as a co-EP and have continued to write. And when I asked you, you were a showrunner on Merit, and I was like basically begging you because I was in film school at the time, and I didn't feel like I was getting the value that I was paying for. I was effectively just paying for a title degree, and I wanted to learn the things you were emailing me and the little lessons you were sending me from time to time as I was talking to you about the projects I was working on in film school. So you were quite reluctant to do this.
Yeah, I was a little reluctant, but we did it anyway. And then we had to talk about, what was the price? And then, I put quite a bit of work on. There's something like 14 or more hours of courses. There's a lot of work that went into it. But then we were talking about how do you price it, and then it was like, well, we can't price it as the same as what the people who are teaching who don't know how to do it. That's crazy. I can't charge what they're charging because there's a lot of bad advice out there, Phil. There's a lot of people teaching who don't know, who've never done it. And so I've paid
for a lot of it too. I've paid for it. Other people in the course, we've all talked about it. We've bought a lot of the same courses from the same people, and those people, most of them have never done the job.
Yeah, and so we were talking about what do we try? Like, it can't be the same as them. I can't, because they're not my competitors. I can't charge. You're paying for my 26 years of experience as a TV writer, and you're paying for them. They just, who knows how much they read a book or something. I don't know what experience they have, and so we had to talk about pricing. So is my course is it more expensive? For sure, it has to be. Because
it's also not the most expensive, and there are people who have never done the job who are selling their courses for more than you sell yours still.
Now we got to raise the prices, Phil.
I know, right? buy now, guys, because the price is going up. No, and I think the other side of that coin, which I'm assuming we'll get back to the question of how to be a better screenwriter, but the other side of this coin is you didn't want to price it so high that it would stop people from being able to get the information.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't want to seem like you were price gouging or anything like that. And there's I think a misconception to anyone selling anything online. They're like, well, why would Michael need to sell me his course? He's already a filthy rich writer who's been working in Hollywood for 26 years. And truthfully, most of that budget goes to pay for editing, for graphic design work, for advertising. And you're doing it because it helps you grow a following because you need a following to publish a book.
Yeah, for a project I'm working on,
which you've talked about.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not going to line pockets. It's really going to get more people into the course and get more people to recognize who you are. Right?
Yeah. And so how that gets back to the question, well, how do you become a better writer? Well, you have to study. You have to study under someone. If you don't want to study from me, study from somebody else, but just make sure they know what they're talking about. So there's that. Because there's bad advice. I follow some people, not that much, but they pop up on social media, and they'll have tips. So like, if you're struggling with your story, do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, why? Like, I could easily say, if you're struggling with your story, hit yourself over the head with a frying pan. It might help, but it's probably not the best thing to do. But maybe it'll help, you know. And so a lot of these tips that they give out, I'm like, I don't. That's not how I would fix a story. I wouldn't even begin to use that to fix a story. And so that's what pisses me off when I see advice like that on the internet. You know, like story help. It's like that. This doesn't help. You know. That's my caveat for anybody who wants to, you know, learn screenwriting.
Yeah.
But you have to learn somewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
And so who you learn from is as important as what you're learning.
Yeah.
I would agree. There are good teachers and bad teachers. And, you know, one of your early course buyers, one of your early students, he wrote a glowing review and talked about how, as a professional trainer for years, he felt that your course was one of the most easy to digest and easiest to access.
Oh, that's nice.
Bruce. Yeah, Bruce.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that's, you know, you could spend $20 on a course, but if it doesn't help you, you're not saving you're not saving money. You're just wasting $20. So, you know, there's that.
Yeah. So study from someone who knows what they're doing. Right.
Yeah. That would help.
Hi guys, it's Michael Jamin. I wanted to take a break from talking and talk just a little bit more. I think a lot of you people are getting bad advice on the internet. Many of you want to break into the industry as writers or directors or actors, and some of you are paying for this advice on the internet. It's just bad. And as a working TV writer and showrunner, this burns my butt. So my goal is to flush a lot of this bad stuff out of your head and replace it with stuff that's actually going to help you. So I post daily tips on social media. Go follow me at Michael Jamin Writer. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And let's be honest, if you don't have time, like just 2 minutes a day towards improving your craft, it's not going to happen. So go make it happen for you at Michael Jamin Writer. Okay, now back to my previous rant.
All right, another question. How to break a story in screenwriting?
Yeah, so that's a lot of the course is dedicated to breaking a story. And breaking a story is how you unpack the elements of a story to make it engaging. So breaking a story refers to literally when we're in the writer's room, we have a whiteboard and we draw act 1, act 2, act 3, and we literally show you how to lay it out. And I teach us in the course how to lay out the idea so it unfolds in a way so that it's engaging. And so that's what story breaking is. And that is a huge portion of what the course is. So
yeah, and I will separate out here too. You know, when I first started, I was reading forums and on blogs, and you know, at the time, this is like 2008, 2009, 10, there really wasn't like a lot of opportunity in the podcasting world or other places to get this information. So just going to your social media right now, people are going to learn a ton more than what they had when I was first starting this process over a decade ago. But I was going to say there's a big difference between plot structure, which is what most people are teaching, which is by page 3, you need to you need to have your inciting incident, right? And by page 30, you need to enter the new world. And they're breaking off all these like ethereal concepts of what needs to happen versus story structure, which is this is something that needs to happen here because this is how it is engaging. And I do not care how you get from here to there. That part is up to you and your craft as a writer. But these things have to be here like tent poles holding up a tent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we try to make that simple in the course. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. What do we got now?
Cool. What degree do you need to become a screenwriter?
You don't need any degree. So when you get hired, no one's going to ask you what college you went to. No one cares about, Phil's got a degree. No one asks about your degree.
Yeah. This is fun, right? My school closed. I never got my degree. It just says congratulations. But I got this when I walked across the stage. My family was there, still working on getting an actual piece of paper. No one has ever asked for this, and the writers room got a big kick out of this when I showed this to them this week.
Yeah, no one cares about your degree. So I've worked with some very talented writers who didn't even go to college. They just graduated high school. So the question is, do you know how to tell an engaging story on the page? We're going to read your script, and if the script is good, you'll get hired. No one's going to ask to see your degree. Now, you have to learn from somewhere. You can go to film school, and if you find a good teacher at this film school, great. But at film school, you're also going to learn other things that you may not want to learn. You're going to learn editing, lighting, camera work, lenses, and stuff, which is great. It's like it's a trade school. If you want to learn that, sound operation, if you want to learn that, great. But if you want to just be a screenwriter, you don't need to go to film school to learn all that. You could just take a screenwriting course and save a lot of money. But it depends what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. What makes a good screenwriter?
There are, I don't know. That's an internet question for sure. A good screenwriter is someone who knows how to tell a story that someone wants to find out what happens next. That's it. Are you interested in continuing to watch this or not? That's the difference between good or bad.
Good stuff. Can screenwriters become directors?
Absolutely. And that happens quite a bit. And it's a good way to become a director. Actually, you'll get that opportunity more because you understand story, and everyone is in service of the story. The writer has to work for the story, the director, the actors, set decorations. We're all there. The story is the master, and we work for the story. And so if you are starting as a screenwriter, then you will, it's a great way to get work as a director is by doing that, or by writing and directing your own stuff.
Yeah. Christopher McQuarrie is a screenwriter who became such a good screenwriter. Tom Cruise offered him the chance to direct Mission Impossible, I think 4, 5, 6, and he writes and directs those, and he's one of my favorite directors. But it's beautiful. You can see the escalation and the quality of those stories as J.J. Abrams got involved, who was a writer first and then a director. And they just get better and better and better as you go along because of people who are serving that story.
So, if you want to be a director, study screenwriting, for sure.
Yeah, and to your point, if you want to be a better writer, study acting, right?
Yep.
We've talked about that before too. Okay, great. How many hours do screenwriters work?
If you're a screenwriter and you're working on a project, you're working on a movie, who knows what your deadline is. If you're on TV, the hours can be really bad. On a multi-camera sitcom, the hours can be long. You could be working 12, 14 hours a day easily. If you're on a drama, usually drama writers work a little less. Their hours tend to be a little more sane, but not necessarily. If the show is in trouble, or if it's poorly run, or if it's incredibly complex, your hours might be just as long. It just depends. It's not a job where we don't get paid by the hour, so you don't punch in a clock.
Yeah, it's that time for dollar trap that I think a lot of us are raised in. You have to get out of that. It's not about the money. It's not about the hours and how much time you're worth. It's about getting the job done and doing the best job you can.
Yeah. And there's diminishing returns. Obviously, when you get more tired and cranky, the work isn't as good, but you got to finish the work. You got to shoot. If you're shooting something tomorrow, it has to be done.
Yeah. Great. What is a log line?
So a log line is 1 or 2 sentences. It describes your movie clearly, or your TV show, your episode, clearly what it's about. And if you can't write a log line, then you don't know what your story is about. And if you don't know what your story is about, then the audience is not going to know what it's about. And so the time to write a log line, sometimes people say, I struggle with writing a log line. It's like, well, then why do you start writing your script? This comes before you write the script. You don't do it after. How are you? Too late. It'll be a giant mess. So it's just 1 or 2 sentences describing what your story is about.
Yeah, it's like a compass, right? It keeps you on track.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
great.
Super important. Don't skip that part.
Yeah. What is a treatment in screenwriting?
It really depends on who you're talking to, but it's basically it's like a longer version of what your story is about. It's a longer log line. It can be a few pages long or longer. It's usually not quite an outline. It's something before an outline.
Yeah. I had a book back here that someone gave me when I was going to film school. It was a guy I worked with in the tech space, and he's just like, hey, I got into screenwriting a little bit myself. Here's a book I bought. Maybe it'll serve you. And famously, I can't remember who it was, but there was a professional writer who said, like, there's a step in your contract when you sell a feature that is typically you need to provide a treatment. And if they ask for that, the response you should give is, great. Will you send me an example of a treatment you like so I know how you want it done?
Right.
And then they never do. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's why I say it depends on who you ask. Like, ask them what someone says they want a treatment. Say, great, what do you want it to look like? And they'll send something that's 4 pages or 14, and that determines what you'll send them.
Yeah, my friend gave me that book, and I actually asked that, used it, didn't get out of it, had to do it for a project, and I just used that book and I got it, and it ultimately turned out they didn't care what the treatment looked like. They just wanted me to do one as part of my grade.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is another question we might have already addressed, but it might be worth doing, which is how to study screenwriting.
There's obviously a course, but you can also study it by reading screenplays, and you could learn just as much by reading good ones as bad ones, or even if you watching TV or films, watch it the first time as enjoyment, and the second time take notes, and I teach you what kind of notes to take. But you can learn just as much from a bad one. If you like, why do I not like this? Why am I losing interest? Why am I, and then as long as you hold yourself to the same standards, it's very easy not to. It's very easy to say, oh, this is a terrible show, and then to write something just as bad because you think you're making an exception. You're like, well, it's a little different. Like, no. You got to hold yourself to the same standards you hold other people to.
Awesome. Can you get a TV writing job without moving to Los Angeles first?
I don't see how that's possible. I mean, and I talk about this as well a number of times. It's like, how do I break into Hollywood without moving to Hollywood? It's like, so now you want Hollywood to come to you? I mean, I guess it's possible, but why are you making it? It's already hard. Why are you making it harder on yourself? Hollywood is filled with people who are desperate to break in, and they have cut to the head of the line. They're in front of you because they're more eager and they're more serious about it. They've already shown that they're willing to pay the price. They're already shown that they're willing to, do whatever it takes. And you are not willing to do whatever it takes. You have conditions. You're saying, I'll do almost anything, almost everything, except for move to Hollywood. It's like, you're not willing to do whatever it takes. So, how serious do you want it?
And I think this kind of goes along with what your philosophy on this all is. But, I think of Diablo Cody. Famously, she wrote Juno, and she was living in Alaska, I think, at the time. And the screenplay was so good that they sought her out. But again, they sought her out because her screenplay was so good.
Yeah, you have to be... Yeah. Is your writing excellent? Is it like that? Is it excellent, or is it just okay? 99% of everybody is just okay. So...
Yeah. There you go. All right. Can you get into TV writing as a researcher?
There are some shows have researchers. I don't know. The bigger budget ones probably do, but I'm sure those shows are going by the wayside. It's as budgets are shrinking. Just most shows don't have researchers. Most shows they have the writers. You got to do your own research. It just depends on the budget of the show. So you can, if you can find that job.
If you can find the job, right?
Yeah.
Better to still focus on your writing.
Yeah, that's what I would do. Yeah.
Cool. Do TV writing agents care about published prose work?
No. I mean, if you have a best-selling book, then yeah, they will care about it because it's an easy to sell. It's easy to market that and make money from you. But if just because you wrote a book that whatever, maybe you published it and 5,000 people read it, so what? It's about, can they sell you? And that doesn't make you more marketable. Even if you're a good writer, it doesn't make you more marketable.
Mm-hmm. This is something that you might be very, very specifically capable of answering. This is why I grabbed this question. How is animation writing different from TV writing?
So I've done both, right? I've written for, it's about a third of my career is animation with King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead and Brickleberry and Glenn Martin. It's very, very similar. Story is story. It doesn't matter whether you were going to animate it, live action, whether it's half hour, drama, comedy, it's story. When I wrote, my first job was on Just Shoot Me, and then I went to King of the Hill, which was animated. And in many ways, Just Shoot Me was more of a cartoon than King of the Hill was. King of the Hill was very real. And so what difference does it make? You're just telling stories. It's just if you understand story structure, you can write either one. An animation, it's usually a little easier to do any kind of special effects, or if you want to, set a scene at an amusement park, that's kind of, you just draw it. And live action, you'd have to rent that out. It would cost a lot more money. And you want to have an explosion, that would cost more money. In animation, you could just draw it. It's not a big deal. So you want to make, if you're doing animation, you want to make use of the animation, or else why not make a live action? Why is this animated if you're not going to take use of the medium? But other than that, but story is story. It's all, if you can do one, you can do both.
Yeah, and you famously told me, I probably using that word wrong, so I apologize, guys. Used it twice. You've told me before that Rat and Link's Buddy System, for example, was really a cartoon.
Yeah, it was kind of cartoony. Action. Yeah, and it was a live action show, but it was kind of cartoony, and that was the tone they wanted. So that's cool. All right. Yeah. We did silly stuff on that. We turned the hero into a robot at the end of one episode.
Awesome. How is TV writing different from movie writing?
It's, again, very similar. The main difference is at the end of a movie, the character has gone to a place and the journey is over. So whatever, but in a TV show, there has to be another journey to take. And so, particularly in comedy, if the character reaches a different emotional place at the end of a comedy, whatever lesson they've quote unquote learned or whatever growth they've made, they will forget by the end of the next episode, which is why Homer Simpson is an idiot and will always be an idiot. Despite all the lessons he's learned, you got to put him reset him back to zero, or else he's not funny. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the movie, if you want to make Homer Simpson, if that were a movie, he could become smart at the end, and that's because you're not worried about the sequel.
Right, and that's one of the first lessons I had on the difference between TV and film, is that film ends; it has a finite end, whereas TV is something that can be told and told again, or split up into multiple things. It's really the finiteness of your story can dictate a film.
But again, the key word again is story. If you understand story structure, you can write either one. You're just talking about the ending, which is the last few pages. Okay, you can make an adjustment there.
Got it. All right, got my last question here. You ready for it?
Yeah.
All right. How often do people writing for a TV show travel?
How often do they travel? For work, I guess. It depends.
How often? Yeah, as a writer.
If it's sometimes you work on a show and it's shot, let's say in New Mexico or Georgia, that happens sometimes because those states have rebates, so they have tax incentives to shoot there. And if that's the case, the writer of that episode, the writing is usually done in Hollywood, and the writer of that episode will often travel to the set for a week to oversee production of that show. But just as more often than not, the show's also shot in LA, so maybe you'll travel to the set, which is 5 minutes away, or maybe it's on the soundstage right outside your office. So in terms of traveling, it's not usually a high travel job, but it just depends on where they're shooting it.
Cool. All right. Well, that's a big chunk of questions from the internet that I thought would answer a lot of the questions we're getting.
Thank you, internet.
Yeah, I would say, we'll just pay attention to Michael's Instagram. That's where we put up a tile where you can post your questions, and we tackle those every few podcast episodes. If you're interested in more questions, definitely go check out those past episodes and make sure you're subscribing to Michael so you can be notified when we're looking for questions. Anything else you want to add, Michael?
Yeah. Right. Phil's saying follow me on Instagram, which is at Michael Jamin Writer. And you can also get on, if you like this stuff and you want to have it emailed to you once a week, Phil puts them in an email for free. And we call it our watch list. So you can go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist, sign up for that for free. You're only getting one email per week, so it's not a spam thing. You don't have to worry about that. And that's it. And we'll send you our best content.
Perfect. All right. Well, Michael, thank you. Everyone else, thanks for listening in today.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye now.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.